Good morning. My name is Pamela Miller, and I am the founder of the Storytelling Resource Place in Jonesboro, Tennessee. We have an organization that is unique in the field of storytelling in that we collect, preserve, and share with interested people books, pictures, costumes, musical instruments, storyteller dolls, puppets, everything to do with storytelling, because we are in Jonesboro, the world capital of storytelling. And it is a wonderful place. We invite you to come and see it because there are stories from every part of the world, and there are stories for every possible subject and interest. Today, I'm going to be talking with you about an interest of mine. I have become concerned that many of the people in the United States seem to think that the Walt Disney 1950s cartoon Cinderella is the Cinderella. Let me tell you, that is not true. Matter of fact, it is not the only Cinderella, it's not the best Cinderella, and it doesn't represent the character of Cinderella that thousands of other versions all over the world for the last 2,000 years teach us. And so to find out about a spunkier, more resourceful Cinderella, I'm going to share with you one of our local variants of Cinderella, the story of an Appalachian Cinderella, which was recorded by Richard Chase in the 1940s and is available in his book, Grandfather Tales. The name of this version is Ashpet, and it is written in the mountain dialect. So as we know what it takes to be a Cinderella, see what we can appreciate about this version, about the Appalachian culture, because we're going to get a distinctive lens on that Cinderella story with her bibbity bobbity boo predecessor. And we're going to see how that sorts out when you talk about Appalachia. So come with me now into a mountain town, into a night in winter when stories are told around the pot-bellied stove. And here we'll go to an old granny who is a great storyteller, and the children are nestled around, but the adults enjoy it every bit as much. And so now I present to you Ashpet, an Appalachian Cinderella. Well, now, 'twas long, long, long time ago. And there was this rich old woman had two daughters. And these two daughters were nasty. And they had a hired girl. Oh, yeah, she was bound out to them. And they were so mean to her, they made her do all the work. And she was just a little bit of a thing. Well, they made her do the washing and the gardening and everything, and they didn't give her no nice clothes. They made her dress in rags. She didn't have a room. They made her sleep right up next to the fireplace. And because of that, she was always covered with ashes and soot. So they mocked her and they called her Ashpet. Well, one day they came to be getting ready to go to the big gathering, the church meeting. And they would love to go to that, but they wouldn't let Ashpet go anywhere near it. You see that rich woman? She knew that Ashpet was a lot prettier than her girls. So every time somebody'd come to the house, whisk bang, Ashpet was put under the wash tub. Can you believe it? Bang, right under that wash tub. But they were all getting ready, and they used Ashpet to help them get ready to go. Well, they had a big problem, and this is the problem. They ran out of fire. You know what that means when you're in the mountains and you run out of fire. Well, how are you going to heat your water? How are you going to cook your dinner? And so that old woman, she thought, well, I don't like it, but my nearest neighbor is that old witch woman down the glade. And I think I need to go send one of you girls to borrow some fire from her. So she grabbed her oldest and she said, now, girl, you go down that mountain through the gap and you borrow some fire from that old witch woman. Oh, mama. And she rolled her eyes just like teenagers have done forever. And she said, oh, mom. And mama just kicked her right out and said, you go down there now. And so the oldest daughter sashayed down, thought she was so fun, went through the glade. She wasn't about to go in that house. She stuck her hand through the crack in the log, said, I want to borrow fire. From inside, there came a voice. Well, you can have some fire if you just come in and brush my old hair. Me? Put my clean little white hand in your old coxcomb? You have got to be kidding me. So that old granny, she just said, well, then you're not about right to get no fire from me. You go on back home. And she did. She went on back home, and the mother grabbed the second daughter and she said, you go down. We got to have fire. And so the second daughter went through promenading like she was going to a ball. And she went down and she wouldn't go in either. She just stuck her hand through a window. She said, Granny, I need the fire. And the granny said the same thing. She said, if you'll come in and if you'll just comb my hair, then I'll give you some fire. Me? Oh, I can only imagine what's in your hair. No, I will not touch your hair. And so she went back up, and the mama was stuck with no daughter bringing home fire. And then she immediately thought of Ashpet. Ashpet! And little Ashpet came in from the kitchen. And she said, you go on down there and you don't come back till you bring fire. So Ashpet went walking down as quick as she could. She got to the cabin and she opened the door and she went in and she saw the old lady and she said, good evening, Auntie. Why, good evening, Ashpet. Granny, I need to borrow a coal of fire, please. Well, tell you what I told the others. I need you to brush my hair till it's smooth. Will you do that? Well, of course I will. And so she brushed the old lady's hair until it was all untangled and smooth. And then as she was doing it, that old witch woman said to Ashpet, ain't you never wanted to go to the church meeting? Oh, yeah, more than anything, but that ain't going to happen. Every time they leave the house, he'd give me a whole bunch of chores, and I couldn't possibly finish all those chores in time. Well, we'll just see. Tonight, after they're all gone, you listen for me and my stick. I'll be coming up to visit you. And then after her hair was done, she turned and she took an old dried toadstool from by the fire, and she took some tongs and she put a coal in it. That way Ashpet could carry it and not be burned. So she handed it to Ashpet and she said, now don't forget, I'll be coming up to see you when they're all gone. Ashpet said, oh, thank you, Granny. Thank you. And so Ashpet took the fire up there. They got their fire started again, heated the water, bathed, and ate their dinner, and apparently used every single dirty dish and pan in the house. And then the mother said to Ashpet, no, of course you can't go. I want you to do every single dish. I want you to do every pot and kettle. I want them sparkling and dried and on their shelf by the time I come back, or you will pay for that. All right, said Ashpet, no surprises there. And so the mother and her two daughters got in their little buckboard and headed off to the church meeting. So Ashpet had just sat down to look at all these dirty dishes when she heard that click, 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 click of that stick on the stone coming up the path. And there was the witch woman. And the witch woman said, so you still want to go to that church meeting, Ashpet? Do I ever? Well, all right then. All right. You stand here by the door. I got something for you to see. And so Ashpet, having no idea what was going to be shown to her, she stood by the open door. And that old witch woman, she took her old walking stick, she circled it a couple times in the sky, and she said, oh, dirty dishes, jump off the shelf. Get in the boiling waters, wash yourself. Scrub dishes scrub. And those dirty dishes came jumping off the shelves into that scalding lard water and bubbled. So it was like a bunch of balloons. And they were dancing and they spun and spun until they were all dry and sparkling. And then they went right back up on that shelf. And boy, did they look nice. Ashpet was laughing. She'd never seen dishes do that before. She thought that was the funniest thing. And then the old lady said, "That's nothing. You just watch this." And she swirled that stick around and she said, "Pots and pans, hammer and stout. Get to the creek, scour yourself out. Scour, pans, scour." And those pots and pans, they lifted up in the air and they danced through the air all the way down to the creek. And they scooped up the water and the sand came in and the sand whirled around until it was sparkling. And then rinsed them out and danced all the way back up to beside the fireplace. Well, Ashpet was doubled over with laughing. She never saw nothing like that. And she knew that would have taken hours for me. So then that old witch woman, she said, now, we'll just see if I can help you get to that church meeting. And she reached into her apron and she brought out a mouse. She put it on the bed. Then she brought out a piece of leather, rawhide string. And she arranged it so the mouse had the leather on top and a little string was kind of looped around the end. And she shook her little stick in the air and she said, "Cooey, mare, cooey, whoop." And that became the sweetest little mare you ever saw. So gentle, just right what a lady would want. "Oh," said Ashpet, "that's a real sweet little horse." "I know," says that old granny. And then Granny said, "Well, let's see what I have now." So she had this rag. And then she had two little bits of shoe leather. So she put the rag on the bed and she put the shoe leather down beside the bed and she twirled and she twirled and she said, "Now you have to help, Ashpet. You shut your eyes and you imagine the very best dress you'd ever want." And so Ashpet did. And when she opened her eyes, there was that red dress. Oh my goodness sake. It was so red and it was so beautiful. And there were two little red shoe leathers, little tiny feet for that little Ashpet. Yep, they're little red leather shoes. So Ashpet put them on. She washed her face, got into that red dress, climbed onto that mare. And the little witch woman said, "Now look, you need to leave the church meeting early, because you need to get home and you hide that dress and you hide the shoes. And then we'll hide that mare in the woods and nobody will be the wiser." "All right," said Ashpet. And she went clip, 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 clip off to the church meeting. Oh, she was so happy. She'd never been so happy. And she got there, and yes, she was late. She absolutely was late. But when she walked into that church meeting, everybody saw her. And nobody knew her. Well, Ashpet was glowing. She was so thrilled. Well, there was one person there who really noticed her, and that was the prince. Are there princes in Appalachia? You better believe there are princes in Appalachia. You just have to look hard for them. So after the service, when everybody was still talking, Ashpet ran out, got on her little pied mare, and he followed her and he got on his beautiful horse and started going with her down the road to go home. And as they're going down, and Ashpet is just giggling, everything he says is like the funniest thing she's ever heard in her whole life. He's thinking she's the wittiest one who has ever listened to him. And so they're going down there and she's just laughing and having a time. Meanwhile, her shoe is down here and she's edging off the little red shoe, getting it in her right hand and jamming it into the hedge as she goes by. And they're going down further and going down further. And then Ashpet goes, "Oh, I seem to have lost my little red shoe. Oh, what shall I do? It's my favorite pair." And the prince being a very smart man, he says, I will go back to the church meeting house and I will find that shoe for you. And so as soon as he turns to go back, she skedaddles home and she takes off the dress and the other shoe and she hides it under the bed. And then she hides that mare in the woods so nobody can see it. And then she sits down at the table, all in her ashes and soot, when the rest of them come home. And boy, did they talk about this stranger in a red dress. Ashpet just smiled. Oh, I wish I could have been there. So the prince came back, didn't find Ashpet, finally found the red slipper after he'd looked everywhere. And he went to his father, the king, and he said, Father, person who owns this little slipper is the most beautiful girl in the kingdom, and I won't marry anybody else. Period. And so the king rolled his eyes, thinking, oh, what a joy teenage children are. But meanwhile, they did the, announcement everywhere, trying on the slipper. He will marry whoever the slipper fits, blah, blah, blah. And so finally, it came to where that rich old woman and her 2 daughters in Ashpet lived. And as soon as they saw him with his accompaniment, all those people coming with him on their horses, they grabbed Ashpet and they stuck her under that wash tub. Stay there. And they came up and the prince said, all right, I have this slipper and I'm not going to marry anybody except the person that slipper fits. Oh, said the mother. Well, it seems like one of my girls missed her slipper last week. I bet you better try it on her. I'm sure it'll fit. And so she says to her daughters, you better make that slipper fit or you will regret it. We all need to go move to the castle. And so the first daughter is trying on the slipper. She looks at the slipper and she looks at her large foot. And she said, I just need to go in the other room to try it on. That's all, just the other room. And so she goes in the other room where the prince can't see her. And she chops her heel and she chops her toes. And then she jams the slipper on. And she goes out saying, look, it's a perfect fit. And the prince, who is not stupid, he looks at the shoe on the foot, but then he also looks at the other foot, which goes quite a bit longer. And he says, well, 2 white doves fly in. And these 2 white doves say, heels and toes, heels and toes. Under the tub, the slipper goes. Said the prince, have no idea what that means. Meanwhile, the rich mother says, wait, I have another daughter. And so they bring that other girl up and she also takes it in the other room and she also does a little amending of her foot and jams that slipper on. And this time when the prince looks at her foot, he also looks at her face and goes, I don't think so. Again, those white doves, heels and toes, under the tub, the slipper goes. So the prince shakes his head at that second one whose face did not match what he was hoping. And he goes out to where there's a watch tub all turned over on its front. And he goes down and he pulls it up. And there's a little girl underneath, all covered with ashes. He's surprised. He said, what you doing under there? Well, they always put me under here. Really? He said, well, why don't you come on out and try on this red slipper? Oh, I'm kind of dirty. I don't really. Please come try that red slipper. So she gets out. She tries the red slipper on, which fits absolutely perfect. She pulls the other one out from its hiding place and shows it to him. And then the 2 of them are getting acquainted and he's asking her to marry him and she's saying, yes, she will. And meanwhile, she's washing her face and her hands. She's putting on the red dress and the 2 of them laughing and beaming and the little doves are twittering and saying, that's right, tweet, tweet, that's right. And they go off together to the castle to get married. And meanwhile, that old rich, mean woman and those 2 spoiled daughters, why, they had to do all their own work after that. And that is an Appalachian Cinderella.
What other versions of Cinderella have you come across?
One of my favorites, and that's because it has so many beautiful oral elements, is the 2,000-year-old version of Rhodopis, who was actually written up in Strabo, the Greek historian. She was Greek. She had been kidnapped by pirates and sold into slavery in Egypt. As a matter of fact, the same household that she was a slave in, and again, she was Greek, so she was fair and she had dark blonde hair. The same household had bought Aesop, as in Aesop's Fables, and he was in that household too. And her kindly master, she would dance beside the sacred Nile. And he thought how beautiful it was, her dancing. So he gave her a pair of golden sandals. And the king, the pharaoh, who was Amasis at that time, according to the story that I have, a wide-winged royal eagle, while Rhodopis was dancing in the Nile, swoops down and picks up one of the golden sandals and takes it to Memphis, to the court of the pharaoh, and drops it on his lap. And he falls in love with the woman he imagines that pharaoh, that's she to fit. And it's a lovely story of him going out to watch her dance and falling in love with her. And so the two of them, and it's Amasis, and her name is Notocris, but she was called Rhodopis because she was rosy as the day dawn. And they ruled many years together, and Egypt was blessed. So I love that story. It's very romantic.
How can people find out about the Storytelling Resource Place and what you all are up to?
We have a website that is simply storytellingresourceplace.com. And we are located in Mill Spring Park in Jonesboro, Tennessee. We also have a Facebook presence and Instagram, and we would invite you to come and explore us. We will be sitting out on our front porch more and more, and when you see us, you'll know we're open. We love giving tours. We are in a historic home called the Slimmen's House, which is one of the earliest tradesmen's homes in Jonesboro, Tennessee. It belonged to a tanner. And we would love the opportunity to share that historic home with you, as well as the various things in the house.
And then you all have like a little lending library right outside your house, right?
We have a little free library. That little free library movement that has the little boxes on stakes, so that any person, child or adult, can open it up and borrow a book and then return that book, or keep that book and return another book. So it's a total honor system. And we have been able to circulate books. I've been interested to see what books are donated. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the books that are put in some are Spanish language books, but there are some delightful fairy tales from the Middle East that are showing up, and as well as novels and mysteries. So the little free library is something that gets at the whole idea of everybody should have a book to read. Everybody should. And so we'd invite you to come and look at what's in our box.
Yeah. Last question, how did you get to be a storyteller?
My family says that I never wasn't a storyteller. I am the oldest of 5 children. And I was born with an extra portion of imagination and a smaller portion of common sense. And so from the time I was growing up with my 4 siblings, we were putting on plays. We would take coat hangers and make swords so we could be Zorro. We would tell Cinderella. We would tell all fairy tales. I have been addicted to fairy tales my whole life. And I've always knew they were very important. I thought it was interesting that when I got my doctorate at the University of Southern California, the person who came just after me was George Lucas with his Star Wars, and Steven Spielberg, both went through the program in film just after I left. So they definitely had a propensity for fairy tales and myths. And I'm looking at the mythic elements of the Cinderella story as it replicates the woman's experience, to be contrasted with the hero's journey. I'm calling my book of essays Cinderella, or the heroine with 1,000 shoes.
Thank you so much, Pam. Try to stop recording. There it goes.